Today, we're digging into a text that asks a really fundamental question. What is education actually for? It makes the case that underneath every curriculum, every lesson plan, there's a worldview, a core belief about what life is all about.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with the central question this whole thing is built around. What is it all for? I mean, really, is it about getting a job, being a good citizen? Is it something else entirely? This one question is what drives the entire analysis we're looking at.
The source kicks things off with a pretty powerful claim. Education is never neutral. It's always a means to an end. It's always being shaped by some kind of underlying philosophy, a worldview that dictates what's important to learn and, maybe more importantly, why.
So, to get to the bottom of this, the text identifies four major worldviews that it sees as basically competing to provide the ultimate answer to that question of purpose.
The source kind of boils this massive philosophical conflict down to four distinct goals. It frames it as a battle over the chief end of learning. Is it for the individual, the state, the self, or for God? Each answer creates a radically different kind of educational system.
So first up, the text talks about the humanist worldview. It traces this idea all the way back to the ancient Greek philosopher Protagoras. In this view, the whole point of education is to glorify the individual. Knowledge becomes a tool, something you use for personal pride and to get ahead in your career. Now, the source critiques this, arguing that when man is the ultimate measure of all things, education can end up fostering self-exaltation over serving any kind of greater good.
Next up is the Marxist/Leninist view. And according to the text, in this system, education has one primary job: to create productive workers for the state. That's it. The government controls the entire process, and it's the state that determines your career and your purpose, all based on the needs of the national economy.
And to really make this point stick, the text shares a story about a man it calls Joe. He's a Christian truck driver in China who had always dreamed of being a doctor, but under that system, his path was chosen for him by the government. It's a really powerful example of how an educational philosophy can directly shape a person's entire life.
Then we have the capitalistic worldview. The source argues that this one kind of adapts that serve the state mentality and turns it into serve yourself. The goal is personal economic success, the American dream. The text critiques this as worshiping what it calls the god of economic utility, where a person's value is pretty much tied to their economic output. It also warns about what it sees as a trend of government programs in the U.S. pushing the system toward a more state-controlled model.
And finally, the source presents the Christian worldview. And here, the ultimate purpose of education is totally different. It's not about a career or the state or even just the self. The primary goal is to know God. So every subject, whether it's math or history or science, becomes a way to learn about the nature of the Creator.
And if you want to see how central this idea once was in American education, just look at this. It's Harvard's original mission statement from 1636. It explicitly says that the main purpose of all study is to know God. I mean, that's a stark contrast to the goals we usually hear about for college today.
So, that raises a pretty big question. If that was once the dominant view, how on earth did we get to where we are now? Well, the source lays out a very clear historical progression to explain this massive shift in thinking.
The author pinpoints the year 1859 as a huge cultural turning point. That was the year Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species. According to the text, this event kicked off what it calls the modernist era, and it fundamentally changed the very foundations of education.
So the source material contrasts these two major eras. As you can see, modernism is all about a belief in objective, absolute, and verifiable truth, things that can be proven logically. Postmodernism, on the other hand, really arose as a reaction against that, embracing a worldview that's way more subjective, pluralistic, and pretty uncertain about any big claims to absolute truth.
So according to the source, the ideal modernist teacher was kind of like a neutral conduit, just transmitting facts. The philosophy was that there's no real absolute truth outside of what our senses can verify. So the teacher's job was simply to present the data and then let students decide for themselves what to believe.
But in stark contrast, the text describes the postmodern view as rejecting the very possibility of objectivity. The thinking goes, if no one can be truly neutral, then why should we even pretend? And as a result, the source claims that many postmodern educators now see it as their role to actively influence and impress their own values on their students.